Hi, everyone. My name's Derek Covington Smith, and I'm going to be your host for Spotlight On. Spotlight On is an interview podcast where we talk to different artists working and living in Mississippi. When I moved back to Mississippi, I opened up my studio, the Little Yellow Building, and began teaching. And once the coronavirus hit and really settled in, it became quite lonely. As artists, we're always used to having a lonely studio practice and being one-on-one with ourselves. But when you take out the option of having that community, it becomes really hard. And that's where Spotlight On was born. I started reaching out to artists all over Mississippi and interviewing and learning more about their lives. I'd like to invite you to come along and join me as we talk to everyone and anyone who wants to share their art and their life with us. So I hope you tune in, I hope you subscribe, and join us for Spotlight On. Hey everyone, and thanks for joining us for another Spotlight On interview. We are joined this week by Lawson King. He's a Mississippi artist and sculptor working out of the Delta. Lawson, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Derek. I'm really glad to be here.
So why don't we start off, tell us a little bit about your background in art and just your growing up in Mississippi.
Yeah. Okay. So I grew up in Indianola, Mississippi. I'm born in Greenville, grew up in Indianola. So I'm a good old Delta boy. But there's not a lot of art in the Delta. There's not a lot of art in Mississippi, I guess. And there is, but I think it's more like hidden. But anyway, so growing up, I didn't really have a lot of access to art through Indianola resources, I guess, or my childhood resources. But I was really fortunate to have a grandmother who is an artist and a sculptor. And she used to teach at Delta State University. She taught ceramics there for a number of years. And, I would love going out to her house. She had a little ceramics studio. She would encourage to play and be free, and that was really I guess the start of it. And I really loved just working with my hands and putting things together. And my mom used to have a video store, and one of the things I used to love to do was put together all the displays. And she whenever she would get a big flat box of displays, and they would come in all these patterned cardboards, and that would have little diagrams, and it was kind of like big Legos. And I really loved to do that, and I was so proud whenever I would put it up and just see the work on display. It's so funny because later on, when I was at Ole Miss, I worked at a movie theater. I went to Ole Miss for psychology. I thought I was going to do psychology, and it was one of my big interests. And I've worked at a movie theater and put together their displays, and so that was a real kind of full circle nostalgia thing. And so that was really enjoyable. And I took art classes the whole time I was at Ole Miss, but I guess before that, I went to Mississippi School of Math and Science. So I went to public schools in Indianola up until 10th grade, and I didn't have any art classes. We had gifted class, which was kind of closest thing to it. But, we never really did art in school. We never were really encouraged to be creative. It was mostly the kind of, drill into your head, remember these things kind of thing. So when I went to MS in Columbus, I had my first real art classes. And I think that's where I really, explored a lot of the beginning of a deeper interest, I guess, Yeah. So then, I go to Ole Miss and took art classes the whole time. And, I don't know if it was just because I wasn't an art student or if teachers weren't interested in me, or I was kind of shy, and I didn't, really didn't kind of push myself out there, so I could see how I could be overlooked. But I feel like if a professor had grabbed me and why are you studying psychology? You should be in art. I probably would have switched. But anyway, ended up getting my psychology degree, and then after that, my grandmother was teaching classes through Delta Arts Alliance in Cleveland, Mississippi. It's a nonprofit where they send artists in residence out to public schools and schools in the Delta region who don't have art classes, which is most of them. So she was teaching through them, but she had pneumonia and couldn't teach and asked if I could fill in. And so I started teaching art to little kids for them. And I just really enjoyed it. And it was really inspiring and free, kind of creative. It didn't really feel like work to me. So after a few years of doing that, I decided to go back to school. I did meet that person who pulled me back to school. So when I went to Cleveland to teach, and I met Michael Stanley, who was the new, at the time, he was the new sculpture professor. And every time I'd see him, he would always say, come take some classes. And so I finally was like, okay, I'll take some classes, and ended up just really falling in love with sculpture, really enjoying the process of like making things with my hands, and kind of remembering that childhood joy of doing that and freedom, which, we can lose as we grow older. And after a little while, I guess I decided to work in large scale sculpture, because, like I say, in the Delta, there's not a lot of places to see art, and there are a few galleries around, but, they're not the most welcoming places for everybody. I think art should be for everybody. So I just thought, well, public sculpture is a way for me to share art with everybody, no matter what background, no matter, if you can, wear a certain dress code, if you can speak the lingo, if you, whoever you are, you don't have to feel intimidated to go outside. You don't have to feel intimidated to go look at a sculpture in a park, So I think that for me was a very strong connection also to my childhood. But that's kind of the roundabout way of how I got into art. And then, do you want me to keep going?
Sure. This is great. I'm thoroughly enjoying this.
Okay. So after I made my first big sculpture, it was a broken arrow. It was after a pretty traumatic event at Delta State. There was a shooting on campus, and it was so moving, to so many people, and I just felt like I couldn't not react, through making. So I had an idea to make a broken arrow. The professor who was killed was a historian of Native American history. That doesn't make sense. But yeah. So he anyway. But so I broken arrow is a sign of peace and nonviolence. And as I'm digging deeper into the thing, I realized that I knew the shooter, and then I realized that I knew I knew the victim's wife, and I taught with the victim's wife, and she was just the sweetest kindergarten teacher I'd ever met, and I knew that they had 3 young kids, and I just felt really connected because I felt really connected in a lot of ways, not only because I was there proximally, when we had to go through the 8-hour lockdown and, unsure of if all these rumors of, extra shooters and hostages and all this stuff, there's so many crazy rumors. But on top of all that, I lost my dad when I was 3, and my dad had 3 young children, and I know that they have 3 young children. And so I kind of made this, and I wanted to talk to Elizabeth and just kind of say like, hey, I think I turned out okay. I think there's a little bit of hope there. I mean, if I can offer that, it's kind of a sticky situation to communicate, because I don't want to diminish or diminish the importance of grieving, but I do want to say, hey, I do believe, and I know that they will be okay, and I'm glad that they did get to spend this much time with their father. But yeah, that was very moving. And to this day, his family members still call the sculpture by his name, And that was one of the most, I'm getting tingles thinking about all this, just because it's just so powerful that they can associate someone that they deeply loved and they lost with something that I made, and it could bring them some sense of peace. So that was just really gratifying and moving to me.
And that's a beautiful, beautiful piece. I've seen pictures. I haven't gotten to experience it in person, but I knew bits and pieces of the story behind it. What I didn't know is how in depth you just went with their family, and it's layers and layers of stories and connection and meaningful thought that go into things like your sculpture that you just did, and or that you just described. And to experience that, anyone gets to come up and kind of see their own interpretation, live their own life through that sculpture without knowing that backstory. And now to dive deeper into that backstory is really something special. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. It was a huge point of growth, I think, for me personally, and just I don't know, it gave me a little bit of encouragement and a little bit of confidence that I could do this, because I think at the end of the day, like, one of the things I've struggled with a lot is the confidence, I guess, or knowing that I'm good enough. I guess I'm being a little vulnerable now.
Mine is imposter syndrome. That's
totally.
That's that whole thing. And the more I talk to more artists like you, the artists that I see that are doing important things that I consider, pushing forward and really living your career, all of us have imposter syndrome. All of us think that we're not doing enough, or that we're not real, or we're just making, but it's kind of that way in the art life. You make it up as you go and dredge a path forward. I want to ask you a little bit about your process because you work in such a large scale, and that's got to take time to think out and properly put together and make all the logistics and the nuts and bolts work. So tell us a little bit about your process on that.
Yeah. So when I made that sculpture, that was my first big piece. That was my first really welded piece out of steel. And I really, look at a lot of the problems with it now, 4 or 5 years later. So I guess my process comes a lot from my time working with Ray Katz. He's a sculptor in Michigan, and he in the Detroit area. He's in Pontiac. So I went up there after I graduated. I met Ray randomly. Well, I guess not randomly, but it was at a sculpture garden install, and we were both installing. It was actually that piece I was installing, the arrow downtown. And he was installing one of his pieces, and we kind of started to chat. And he says, "Well, what are you up to?" And I said, "I don't know. I just graduated." He said, "What's your plans?" And I don't know. And he says, "You want to come work for me in Michigan?" And I'm like, "I don't know. This guy seems kind of brash and intimidating. I don't know if I want to go up there and have that experience." But I did, took a chance, and it was the best thing I could have done. I mean, he's a sweetheart. He just seems rough on the outside. But anyway, so Ray he turned 82 last October, and he's in the shop every day. He's very, very hardworking, and one of the things I learned from him is that you don't always have to know how you're going to do it. I guess you just know you're going to do it. And you trial and error is just like one of the biggest things that is like has been the best teacher for me. But as far as my personal process, I like to work from sketches. Usually when I'm making large scale work, I do a lot of sketching. I do a lot of little doodles really quick. I don't really like to spend too much time on them, because I feel like the more time I spend on a sketch, the more contrived it is, Yeah. Like when I put it down, it's there, it's free, it's natural, it's supposed to be what it is. And so then I kind of go about, well, how do I translate this into the next step. And a lot of that just comes down to technical, like, ability of fabrication, which is a lot of stuff I learned with Ray. I guess that's a little, I don't want to go into too much detail about that because it's not really exciting.
Yeah.
But
there's another sculpture piece you did that is an arm with a balloon that's wrapped around it and kind of floating adrift and escaping. But that, if you pull the threads, especially on your Instagram, you'll find that sculpture, but then you also find all these amazing paper cuts that mimic the movement and the imagery, and very Matisse-like, very, very, nice and simple and clean. And for me, very aesthetically pleasing. I enjoyed looking at every single one of them.
Thank you.
Tell us about that. Tell it what's your feeling and thoughts behind all the balloons and the paper cuts?
Yeah. Okay, cool. I love that. Thank you. Okay, so while teaching for Delta Arts Alliance, one of the big things I used to love with kids was cut and paste, just paper, just collage. That's one of the best things, kids don't have, like, you can rip it. There's not as much pressure to make a mark. Kids are, and you want to make a mark perfect, right? You want to put that mark from your head to the paper, but it rarely happens like that without, years and years of training. So the kids, would just really love the collage because it's like almost free. Like, this is kind of a collaboration between me and the paper. So it's not really all me if it's not perfect. But anyway, so I love Matisse. I love his inspiration from children, and I'm very inspired by children. I love composition, and I love simple. And that's really difficult, I think. I really struggle sometimes because I see, like, all the big murals and paintings and popular artwork and, modern art, and all of it's so busy, like so busy. And, like, it's layers and layers and layers and crazy stuff happening everywhere. And it's just over stimulating. So for me, it's, like, really refreshing to have a very blank, or not blank, not empty. It's space, it's environment, it's atmosphere. And so to me, it plays a big role in the composition, the negative space, but so I started these hand and balloon compositions. I recognized that over, experimenting with imagery and artwork, like, what interests me, like, I'm interested in psychology and how we think. I'm interested in why we make the decisions we make. I'm interested in how we deal with those difficult decisions. And through trying to explore those ideas, I recognized a couple of images in different works dating all the way back to, like, my time at Ole Miss, where I was just kind of taking classes for fun. And that was the hand and the balloon. And so I kind of tried to isolate those and, kind of see how I feel about it. So after doing some drawing, some paper cuts just really were so much fun. And these little clean paper cuts are so difficult. But they look so easy, they look so simple and easy, but they're so difficult to be, like, really precise. And it's a really fun process. And to me, it is kind of reflective of my ideas of, like, how do you deal with a tough situation? Like, sometimes it's hard to know if you're holding on to something or if you're letting go of something. Like, there's a thin line between that. And it's funny because when I was first working on this imagery, I was only thinking of the letting go, or wait, no, I was only thinking of the holding on. Like, if you imagine, like, the balloon, you're trying to hold on to something for too long, right? And so I was having a conversation with my grandmother, who I talk about these ideas a lot with, and she says, "Well, what if the hand's not holding on? What if the hand is trying to let go?" And I was just like, "Oh my God!" Like, that's, I had kind of an epiphany, and it just, like, made me so much more interested in the composition. And one thing that I really love about the simple composition of the hand. The hand is a point of action. You can, I mean, the first drawings, we did as a species were of hands, and we would cover our hands with the clay. So just that sacred imagery of a hand, and when I create these compositions, to me it's like the hand and the balloon, they're very subtle movement, changes in the composition can change the emotion so quickly for me. So like, if the hand is drooping, or if the hand is erect, or if the taut, or if the balloon is, kind of got them tangled up, it's like, each one of these is kind of like a situation, I guess, I've experienced and have tried to express through this imagery of hands and balloons.
I think that's what drew me to it so much and why I enjoy it so much. It comes back to that whole paradox of, do you see the glass as half full or half empty? And for me, the answer is I see the glass, and it all depends on whether you're thirsty or you're not as to whether it's half full or half empty. And I just, with the balloons, you have the exact same experience. Are you letting go? Are you trying to catch it? Are you pushing it away? There's all that type of thought, but again, wrapped up in that simplistic, minimalistic imagery with this nice space. You nailed that on the head. You have this nice space left over to let your eye rest, and also have these just intense pulls of color. Every once in a while, just a couple intense pulls of color. Like I do. I really enjoy those. I want to jump to now. You recently were awarded the Mississippi Artist Fellowship from the Mississippi Artist Commission, right? Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so that was huge. I mean, that was a huge boost in my confidence, I think, and huge. I don't know. It was just a huge encouragement for me that I'm on the right path. Because I think as artists, it's really difficult. Well, as any business person, it's really difficult to work for yourself, and it's really difficult to make those tough decisions. It's easier to work for somebody else and take orders, and not have to think about how you're going to continue the business the next 4 months. But as far as the grant goes, that kind of solidified for me like my commitment, or encouraged my commitment, because at the end of the day, I think that's what it is. Art's not always easy. Art doesn't always just come. Art's not always fun. Even if I try to make these difficult situations look fun by adding color and making them childish looking, it's not always fun. And it's a commitment. And I think this grant and just the interest that people have shown in my work, and the grant has definitely given me the finances I need to buy a welder, to buy material, to buy tools. Like, that stuff is really expensive. And it's really cool because I just actually joined an artist collective in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And so I have a shop, and now it has a nice new welder, and it's got a few sheets of aluminum and steel waiting on me. I've actually been working on a few pieces. But it was huge to see to receive the recognition, from my home state's leading arts agency was just really kind of comforting.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. You're right. It's reassuring. You're on the right path, and somebody's giving you recognition for that, and you deserve it. You just definitely deserve it.
Oh, thank you, man.
So you mentioned that you got the new studio. What's next? What's in the future for you? What are you planning out to do now?
Well, since I've got the studio, I've just been working like crazy in there. It's just been so much fun. It's like right outside my window here. I can just go right outside to the studio, and I just want to make a lot of work, and I just want to show a lot of work. I want to build a body of work that I can enter into shows, nationally, maybe internationally, and just really hit the grindstone with showing my work. I think that's one of the most important things I can do for myself. there's a lot of sculpture gardens and city sculpture parks that are popping up around. People want to boost morale, and so they do that through arts, and so that's really great because there's not a lot of people who work large, and so a lot of times you'll see the same people these sculpture installations, and if I continue to make large work, or if I continue to put myself out there and network, like I'm really happy that you reached out to me, because one of my main goals when I came back from Michigan was just to like unite or connect with other Mississippi artists and to build a strong connection between Mississippi artists. And I think that's really important, because we need to be a support system for each other, because we don't have big collectors like Atlanta and Detroit and LA and New York. We've got small time collectors who are picky and who want to, well, I mean, I'm sure all collectors are picky, but, who are just maybe a little bit less open to experimentation or new ideas. And so it's hard, I think, for us to experiment too far out of our comfort zones without thinking like, well, how will I sell this? Like that's a difficult part about being a Mississippi artist. So it's kind of like I have to reassure myself that it's going to show, and I learned this from Ray, my mentor in Michigan. He, when I first got there, we would just make sculpture constantly. I mean, 10-foot, 20-foot sculpture constantly every day, 8 to 5. And, we've got 10 sculptures in the yard, 3 sculptures in progress in studio. And it's just like, I start to say, well, Ray, where are you going to put this one? He's like, I don't know, it'll go somewhere. And so the passion for making and the value that he gave art was really enlightening for me, because I would make a little drawing and I'd show it to him, and he would look at all the lines so intently, and he would value it in a way that was just special. It just showed me like this has value, and that's a huge issue, I think, with art, because we can fill up our studios with our own work and then they devalue in our mind over time. But I think one of the biggest things I learned from Ray was that it all has a lot of value. And I need to remember that. And it's hard to remember that sometimes when money is more.
Well, and you're working on such a larger scale than I'm used to, not just like size wise, but financially. I can go and invest in a canvas for $100 and it'll be huge. But when you go make a large piece of work, like that's a much larger investment in materials and everything. Right.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, that's why I'm really, really appreciative to get that grant. I mean, that was huge to boost. I mean, they want to help young artists or Mississippi artists improve their careers by new ways. And that's really amazing that we have that opportunity, I think.
Yeah. So I'm going to bug you one more time. I'll ask you one more question and then we'll kind of out this. For anybody that's listening, artist wise, or somebody who's thinking about getting into art or thinking about getting into sculpture or anything, what is some life advice from your own personal experiences that you could share with them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think some of the biggest things that I've learned is that I need to value my work. Like I just said, value my work, because if I don't value it, other people won't. I need and to stay committed. I think that's the biggest thing, and to stay open. But it's difficult when you show somebody work and they have an opinion about it. It's difficult to receive that opinion, but also maintain your personal point of view without letting them kind of dilute your vision. But just really staying committed, really kind of grinding, really kind of, make work and meet other artists and surround yourself with other artists who are working, because it's really inspiring when you see, your friend over here who's made, really cool paintings all year. And you're like, man, that guy works really hard. Like I want to make some stuff now. It's just like surrounding yourself and building a network of support is really important. So yeah, valuing your work, building a network of support, and grinding. I think that's huge.
Those are all really good points of advice to give too. You can take that advice from the time when you barely touch your toe into art all the way into full-fledged career. Like those are things that trouble every single artist at some point during your life. And we have to keep those things in mind. We've been joined today by Lawson King. Lawson, thank you so much for joining us. You can be found on Instagram at Lawson Mayne, LAWSON MAYNE. Where else can anybody find you?
I think that's probably where I'm most active. I'm hoping to get a website up and running this year. That's one of my goals, so by summer I should have a website, and I'm sure I'll post about that on Instagram, or I'll put it in my bio, so definitely just follow me on Instagram and I'll keep you updated.
Well, thank you, Lawson, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for listening and tuning in. This has been another wonderful interview from a Mississippi artist and sculptor working in our state today. Definitely go and check out Lawson King on Instagram and keep up with what he's up to, because the sculpture work is amazing. The art is amazing. We, as Mississippi artists, have so much talent to give and put out in the world. So until next time, y'all have a great one.